All right, today I'm going to give you guys a really good in-depth look and explanation of the Z. There's not going to be any driving videos today because it's cold, dark, wet, and raining. Um, Maybe in a couple days. But anywho, so yes, by the way, I am in pajamas. Get over it. So, backstory. I love Z's. I had a 2013 370. Unfortunately, I hydroplaned under some bad road conditions and lost the car. Got a TT 370, had it for a while, and kind of wanted to get out of the position in life that I was in at the time, so I sold it to move up here. Coming from a 370, I knew it was TT or nothing for me, so started to look into what I wanted to do to into a 370Z that was TT, and it was just going to be way too expensive. Uh, I mean, if you TT that car, you need a forged internal, you need a tune straight off the bat. There's no tuning that thing yourself. Uh, that's just how it goes. It's all money. You can't throw any skill at that car. I mean, you can try and fab up some cool stuff for like exhaust work and whatnot instead of just like spending 10 grand on the Fast Intentions turbo kit, or go halfway and get a single turbo and have all the problems associated with that. I think the best solution single turbo wise was like a twin scroll that's mounted by your transmission, but I just for me, it was Fast Intentions or nothing because the other kits were like a grand or two cheaper, and they still are today, from what I can tell. So I kind of decided I wanted a TT 300, so I got this car, and this was picked up from uh, Bloomington, Indiana, from a guy that built the car with his kid. And at that time, it was a mostly stock TT 300. It had like most of the silicone hoses and stuff. It had like the Disco Potato twin turbos. Yes, I said Disco Potato. That's like the nickname of the turbos. That it's some size of a Garrett turbo. I think they're like 2865s or something like that. I look up Disco Potato Turbo and you'll get the backstory to why they named it that. But basically, I kind of decided that after having that car for about 6 or 7 months, it had a little bit of oil getting into the intakes, and I tried my heart out to track it down, and it just was not going to happen. I mean, when you've got two turbos with a shared intake track in an engine bay this size, I mean, you're talking like the turbo was down on the frame rail, like in between the frame rail and the motor. So even if you got under the car, you couldn't hardly get to the turbo. There was just no diagnosing the thing. I just couldn't do it. So I wanted something that I could just reach in and work on. And mind you, my opinions on this stuff has changed a little bit since then, but I'm just walking you guys through my thought process. So long story short, I love GTRs. I love inline six engines, and I didn't want to be another 2JZ guy. I kind of wanted to keep it in the Nissan family, so I started to look into the swaps. You get an RB26 just because it's called an RB26, or you can get an RB25 and from the get-go have variable valve timing, which is like a $2,000 upgrade for the RB26. So I just decided from the get-go an RB25 was going to be the way to go. Forged internal, of course. So I bought this motor from a guy in North Carolina. He had a dump truck turbo on it, and he had put the forged internals in the car, ran it 2 or 3 times, and basically he blew the head gasket. I think he just didn't clean the surfaces between the engine and the engine block and the head correctly. So yeah, he blew the head gasket, sold it to me for... Basically, this dude cheated me. He said that it was a sleeved block and all this other stuff, and he sent me these fake pictures, and it was a big shebang, but, you know, when it was all said and done, I overpaid a little bit for what I got, but I just kind of had to go from the ground up there. So I got this engine. It was in rough looking shape. It had a blown head gasket. So from the get-go, I threw it on an engine stand, and I went ahead and, of course, pulled the head off it, pulled the oil pan off it, figured out that half the stuff that he had with this thing was just a lie and needed to be replaced. So sold off what I could and built it up basically from a short block back up. I used the stock head because the budget got spent on getting the engine to where it was supposed to be. And anyway, so it has a billet spool. That's the brand, spool billet oil pump gears. It has, I'll so you guys have something to look at other than my face. So obviously you can't see it, but it has the spool billet oil pump gears. It has a fluid damper harmonic balancer. I'm just going to name stuff as I go. It's got a CX Racing rear sump aluminum oil pan, which you can see hanging out down right here. Let me get the light on. Yeah, a little dirty, but that's the rear sump aluminum oil pan, high capacity. It's got the Freddy intake manifold, which actually came with the motor. I shaved it down a little bit and gave it a nice paint job. It's got basically zero chipping on it. It's just a little dirty. I got, let's see. Sorry, my fingers are getting in the screen. This is a Raceworks, I guess like eBay fuel rail, but I got ID 1000 E85cc or 1000cc E85 fuel injectors. I went ahead and got a proper fluid-filled fuel pressure gauge. This is I can't remember what the name of that brand is. I want to say like Radiation, Ray something. Can't remember. But it's a really good brand that's used a lot in drag racing, and this is just the fuel pressure regulator. But it's super reliable, super rebuildable. You can change an orifice out in it if you go up to bigger horsepower, so you can change the range in which this is accurate at. I think currently I have it tuned to 50 PSI. But fuel comes up in the rail here, exits this line, super clean. You don't have a fuel pressure regulator hanging out on your wall somewhere. This fuel line then drops down, runs into, again with the light, I'm going to try to make sure you guys can see everything I talk about. Don't mind that stuff on the floor. That's not oil. It's paint from undercoating my Jeep. It goes through this E85 sensor and then it returns back. Before it comes into the fuel rail, it goes into this washable fuel filter that's easily accessible. This is a fuel pressure gauge, but I honestly, I don't have it hooked up to the ECU. I think I had it hooked up at one point and it was reading weird. I need to get a better branded one, but I basically just, instead of using a fuel pressure cutoff, I use a AFR cutoff, which is a lot quicker than me physically watching it. But in all reality, I should get that hooked up and working. Continuing. Moving forward, we got the CX Racing thick-walled, equal length header exhaust, which is super nice, no cracking. Again, it is the thick-walled CX Racing manifold. People have issues with manifolds from all across the market cracking. This thing has no cracking. I've taken it off and inspected it. It's got a Turbo Smart wastegate. This has been cleaned up by me in like a mill and a lathe to get everything nice and tight again. I pressed new brass bushing in there that the valve rides on. So it's really, really nice. It's the older design, which was a little bit beefier. Open dump wastegate just pops out on the ground. Yes, this actually passes inspection because we don't have emissions here. We have safety, so your stock exhaust system has to be intact, which technically it is. So Garrett GTX 3076R Gen 2 turbo. That is the newest, baddest turbo of this size that I could get. And yes, it's sizable looking, but this does not do justice of how big this thing really is. This is a 3076R on a 2.5 liter motor. I think this is rated up to like a 3 liter, 3.5 liter motor, and is far down to like a 2 liter motor. This is like a 750 horsepower capable turbo, if I'm remembering correctly, and this is the small frame compressor side. They do have a bigger frame, but I wanted the smaller because it needs to fit, and I'm not trying to be fancy, I'm trying to be functional. Got a tile blow-off valve, and then you can see the intake track coming into said intercooler with a 10-inch spout fan controlled by the ECU directly. Comes up through here. Sensor off of the bottom is temperature sensor. This is super awesome. Nobody puts these on their car, and they should. That, if it'll focus, see Euro sensor? So instead of a throttle position sensor that uses resistance and a spring and like a switch that tells you that you're at 0 and then gives the ECU a rough value, and you have to have it set just right to get just 0 at idle, and then forget about that. This is a Hall effect sensor based throttle position sensor. So the way that it works is there's a Hall effect sensor, which is a little sensor that detects how far away something metallic or ferrous is away from it, which means something that could be magnetized. And basically what it means is you can take the little knob on the end of that gets turned by the butterfly valve and spin it continually. Like, you could put it on an electric motor that just keeps spinning, and it's going to give a degree readout, basically. It's still a voltage, but it's like PWM, pulse width modulation. Take my word for it, it's literally the best setup that you could have for something like if you're going to do a throttle cable style, which I do because, you know. Anywho, custom made mount, bolts right up. Got a nice little coupler in there. Works great. Moving on, we got the R35 coil packs. Technically, these are out of a G37, but that is because they use the same coil packs as an R35 GTR. So it's just cooler to say these are the R35 GTR coil packs. The reason I use these on, by the way, my custom-made bracket, which with 3 bolts, and unplugging that gray plug and that yellow plug, you can just undo these 3 bolts and lift that whole thing out of here to do spark plug work. Just like that. Super easy. You don't have to undo any of this. Just undo the 3 bolts, do the 2 plugs, pops right off. The reason I did that is because when you get into higher boost applications with smaller literage motors, you start to get something called spark blowout, which is something that I was battling with when I first got this car dynoed. And basically what happens is as the compressed air enters the cylinder, it blows the spark off of the spark plug, literally. I changed all different temperature ranges of spark plugs. I changed the brand. I used the NGK Platinum. I tried everything. We tried everything. And this was on my dime on the dyno. It sucked. But basically what ended up happening is I had split fire coils on this thing stock. And it basically, apparently those things have like the lowest joule rating output on the market. Why an aftermarket coil pack company that's pretty well known throughout the industry can have the lowest output of power is beyond me. It was only slightly lower than the stock R32 or 33 GTR coil packs. So, you know, whatever. Basically, I got fed up with the problem and I decided I was going to go with the biggest, baddest thing that you could buy without spending, you know, $250 a coil pack. So R35 coil packs were the answer. They are the highest output coil packs in any production car that you can readily get. I promise. Do your research if you want to know. The spark plug setup that I'm using is the NGK coppers. Coppers are what you want to use in anything really. I don't believe that platinum stuff unless you're doing something stock like a stock motorbike that's not boosted and all that. But if you're doing anything aftermarket, you want NGK coppers. So this is running coppers. They work great. On that note, I'm going to tell you, I am fighting a problem with, I don't even know what to call it. It's not really a timing issue, but it's kind of a timing issue. Basically, the way these stock engines work is they have a cam angle sensor, and this tells the ECU what the position of the motor is physically at and when to fire spark plug 1 and on. That means that it's guessing where the crank is degree-wise. And because of that, sometimes when I go to do a pull, it like hesitates. And if I get off it and get back on it, it stops hesitating. This was originally thought to be caused by electric magnetic interference from the sparks and bad grounding and all that. Long story short, this thing got a completely custom wiring job done. Yes, it looks bulgy, but that's just because I'm trying to protect it. This is you can kind of see it in there if I shade it, but it's a centrally wrapped wire harness, which means it's super flexible. You can bend it any direction that you want, and it's not going to pull on any of the wires. I have it ran on the top just because I want it up where it's cool and I can visually inspect it every time I'm in this engine bay, because electronics are so important in cars like this. So originally it was thought that was the problem. Made a completely custom wire harness, new battery system, bigger battery wires. I'll show you all that stuff in a minute. And didn't solve the problem. It just didn't. The problem that we were associating to that at first actually was the spark plugs. We figured out that problem. I figured out that problem. And now it's down to this. So there's an $800 kit that gives you a cam angle sensor and a crank angle sensor. And it tells your ECU where both of them are. And then it can adjust accordingly. And you will know where everything is, and it will have no problems and no hesitation. And honestly, that is the one thing that's keeping me from getting this thing tuned to like 600 horsepower plus, because I mean, it's just that. So moving forward, the radiator is V-mounted, so it basically runs from the top of the intercooler down into the chin of the bumper. So the air enters the bumper and it gets shoved up into the intercooler and then back into the engine bay and then through the radiator and down to the ground. So instead of all that hot air from your radiator coming through the engine bay, it gets shoved down at the ground. I have two 12-inch spowl fans, which I'll try and show you, under the radiator. Yep, you can see them chilling. And those, when they turn on, you can stand at the back of the car and it will blow leaves out the back of the car. This thing runs super cool when it needs to. Yeah, so that's cool. Power steering. I am using a Volvo electric power steering pump because I wanted to keep the serpentine belt to a minimum in this engine bay, just for simplicity. Because I have done that, I now have this big open space in here which can be occupied by an AC compressor in the future, which will mount to the block off of a couple holes right here and off of here and here. That's a future project, but I wanted to leave that room open so that I can get AC in this car, because everything for that is intact. But the Volvo power steering pump is basically a little electronic power pack, and it powers the power steering rack, and it is turned on and off by the ECU also. So that's a pretty cool deal. This is my boost controller. It's just a typical valve. Sorry for the dead space, guys. I'm just trying to think about what else I got going on in here. You got your typical vent to air catch can and your typical broken window BS. It happens in all of these cars because when it's stock, the battery sits here and people rip them out because they're too lazy to remove that. They crack and they're expensive to buy. And honestly, if I replaced it, it would be the nicest looking thing on the car because I have some body work that needs to be done. So I'm just kind of rocking the sleeper look right now. This thing shocks people. But yeah, there's more going on in here. I'm just forgetting some stuff. This whole thing was just It came together so well. This thing gets so much attention at car shows. It drives so smooth. It's like a spaceship. I drove this thing to Florida and back from St. Louis. I cannot ask for anything better out of this car. I really can't. I mean, it's amazing, and I love this thing. But yeah, if you guys ever want to see this in a car show, you can come to St. Louis and shoot me a message, and I'll try and show up if I can. Let's go to the interior. First, we'll start the back of the car. Now, I'm going to tell you, I got a big subwoofer chilling in the back right now. No, it's not for this car. It's for the Jeep. I'm not like that. But I'm going to have to zoom in so I can turn on my light. Battery's mounted here. Yes, with a ratchet strap. It's fine. It's been here forever. I am going to make an enclosure for this eventually, but I'm running huge battery cables, 2 of them. I think they're double-aught battery cables, and they run all the way up into the footwell up there. But as you can see, this is all kept completely stock. That was kind of something I wanted to do, was maintain the stock interior so that the car looks like it should have come like this from the factory. Don't mind the trash. I'm going to show you the electronics. This is where the factory ECU is normally kept. Yes, that is the stock floor panel. They wanted all the weight reductions they could get in this car stock. So, my battery died. I've got about 15% left on my battery, so I'll be swift. The right side, this looks a little cluttered. I got some loose wires. But basically, bottom left, you got your fuse panel. Top left, you got your relays that control stuff like E-fans and whatnot. You got a breaker down between the red block and the fuse panel down at the bottom center. That's for your SPAL fans. And then to the right is the power cable breakout for the whole car. This is nice because if you have any issues, it's super, super easy to get to. As you saw, I just, it's even easier to put back. You just pop the panel in there, pop the carpet back down, and boom, you're done. This is where the ECU lives. Got a nice steel plate. It's mounted on there with Allen screws. It, is plugged into here. You can see my programming cable hooked up to it currently. So whenever I need to program, I just hook up into this right here. I'm going to go around to the other side so you guys can see my screen, but I have a Raspberry Pi screen in here that runs a paid version of OpenAuto Pro. So basically this can screen mirror your phone. You can program your car from here if you were crazy enough to get Haltech downloaded onto Linux. You can hook a mouse and a keyboard up to it. This whole bezel was purchased from overseas also. Nice little 3D printed 300ZX badge, USB power outlet, and while that's powering up, all the gauges work except for coolant, pressure, and oil. Just being up front. Got your AEM 3-in-1 gauge. It does E85, AFR, outside is boost. Reprogrammable, there's different faceplates for this, and the programming cable for it is in the glove box. All you have to do is pull it out, hook it up to your laptop. In the ceiling here, you've got your stereo control. It's pretty nice. I got kicker equipment in here. Quick little walkthrough of here. Basically, you got dashboard, different screens. I like simplified just because it's clean and simple. But you can also get fancy and go with like a sports screen. And these are also programmable. You can even come in here and do your equalizer stuff. And as you can see, this thing's really quick and snappy. It's no joke. It's super sensitive. You can do your music, you can screen mirror, you can do applications, I mean all sorts of stuff. You can even turn the screen off whenever you're driving in the dark. You don't want the screen. Anyway, I'll follow up with a running and driving video sometime, probably when it's a little nicer out, but this is just a good overview of the car, Bodywork is not a strong point. It's, it's 30-something years old. It's got some peeling paint, some fading paint, minor dent there and here. But the whole rest of the car is gorgeous. I got these beautiful Varstone ES2 wheels on it. I got Nitto tires on the rear. I got Achilles tires on the front. I'm going Nitto soon. And man, this thing is just a spaceship. But that's a pretty good little walkthrough of the overall of this car. Oh, I forgot one thing. It has a Valvetronic exhaust. So you can make this thing a lot quieter or straight piped. And you know which way I drive it most of the time. But that's more fun to show in a video where I'm going to start it and drive it and give you guys some audio clips. So yeah, that's a pretty good overview of the car. Hope this wasn't just too much ranting for you guys. Again, if you want to get any other specifics or see anything else in my life, I have a video overviewing all my hobbies and stuff that I do. And if you want to see more about this car, or you want a video on that Jeep that's Volkswagen swapped, hit me up. I'll make a video. I'll post it. Later.